Hey guys, what is up? I am TitoTheOG. And as you can see, I'm getting a little festive today, getting into the spirit of the holidays, that being Halloween. Now, Halloween is right around the corner, and I wanted to do something to celebrate that. And here's what I did. I made this custom action figure of Vampire Shadow the Hedgehog, based on his appearance in Sonic Forces Speed Battle, the mobile game. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Sonic Forces Speed Battle, it came out back in like 2017 when Sonic Forces, the console version, came out. And it's a basically online multiplayer runner where you go up against people, and there are a lot of different unique skins in that game, like Vampire Shadow. And I figured this was probably one of the most fitting ones to make for this holiday. And here he is, and I think he looks very, very awesome. I love the colors on him. And in this video, I'm going to be going over how I went through the painting process, assembly, and I even went over how I dyed the bodies black, which I have gone over in a previous video, but that's a little outdated. So this one in this video is going to be the most up-to-date version on how I dye these bodies black. So without further ado, guys, let's jump right in. Bah, 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 bah. That's what vampires say.
And before I get started, I just want to give a huge thanks to my friend Matt Crafts over on X. He is a very talented 3D modeler, and he's done amazing projects like this Sonic Unleashed Shadow the Hedgehog mod, and he was the one who actually helped me out with this project by 3D modeling it. This man is a saint. He's helped me out with many projects in the past, and I hit him up to help me out with this model, and without any hesitation, he got to it and made some amazing stuff. And he actually pointed out a detail to me that I wasn't even aware of, is that the shoes look a little different between the render and the in-game model. And there are inconsistencies between all different versions of this, I guess, costume's appearance between all the different games it's in. Sonic Forces, Sonic Dash, Sonic Speed Simulator, they all have slight differences. Like Sonic Dash having white gloves, same for Sonic Speed Simulator. The in-game version of Sonic Forces being completely purple, on his hat, his gloves, everything being like the same shade of purple. The render is completely different with different shades of, you know, metallic bluish purple hat and different kind of bolts over on his shoes. The Sonic Speed Simulator and Sonic Dash being quite similar to each other with the same shades of purple and then white gloves. My favorite version is definitely the render version, so I'm going to stick as closest to that as possible. Also, guys, don't forget to head on over to the TitoTheOG's Zone Discord server down in the description below, where we talk all things Sonic the Hedgehog action figures and just other Sonic media related. There is where I post all of my sneak peeks on projects I'm working on, and I do frequent giveaways for free, yes, free action figure kits for the winners. It's a very awesome community in there, and I have a whole channel dedicated to custom figures where we can all share our awesome creations with one another, and there are so many people submitting some very awesome things. You guys know who you are. Thank you so much for taking part in this community. Once again, go join down in the description below. Matt Crafts did his magic, and he completely remade the model in HD, modeling all the special bits on the shoes and just giving me a really nice high quality finish for the model, where I then went through and touched it up and made it fit to an action figure by sculpting in details like the rallies on his quills, his eyes, his mouth, gave him some posed hands, and cut out all the holes that I needed in order to put the parts on an action figure. Once I have all the parts ready, I send them to my slicer, and here I'm using Chitubox for my Elegoo Saturn IV Ultra 3D printer. And I'm orienting them so I can print them in a proper way without anything kind of failing on me. And what I like to do is I make all of the heads hollow. That is the best thing to do if you don't want your figures to be top heavy. Then I send it to my printer to let it get to work. Once that's done, it's time to get it off the printer. I get my gloves on because I don't want this icky, gross resin all over my hands. And I take the build plate off, and I have a perfect print, all the parts printed without any fail. I remove all the parts from the build plate, and the next thing to do is to give Shadow a bath in some isopropyl alcohol. So I'm going to bathe him for about 3 minutes or so. And once he's done bathing, I set them to dry, and once they're done drying, I cure them in my cure station for about 6 minutes. Now we have some properly finished 3D parts. And now it's time to get to the fun part. So, since I made the parts hollow, I added some drain holes so that way the resin doesn't get caught up on the inside. And what I do to fill up those drain holes is I use some more resin. So I get some resin on a little paintbrush and I dab it all over the little holes in there, and I use this UV curing flashlight to cure the resin to seal the hole. I'll do that a few times till it's smooth all over and I feel like everything is good enough. And I will say I have all the equipment that I use down in the description below if anyone's interested in purchasing the things I use. Once that step is done, it's time to sand. And I go over the entire figure and sand off all of these support holes, which is honestly my least favorite part of the entire process. I can't stand sanding. It's not hard, it's just tedious. And I prime Shadow's parts once they're done sanding, and here I have a ready to paint Shadow the Hedgehog figure. And let's go ahead and just get started. Some of my favorite paints to use are some of these guys right here: Vallejo Model Color paints and War Paint Fanatic acrylic paints. They're some of the best quality paints I've ever used, and anytime anyone asks me what I recommend, I always suggest them. They are a little bit on the pricier end, ranging from about $3 to $4 per bottle, but you know, you get what you pay for. You get amazing results. So the first thing I started off to paint is the hat. I wanted to match that metallic look that the hat has, so I used Vallejo Model Color blue mixed with black violet and mixed with some metallic medium, which kind of gives it that shine I want. It did take a few coats of paint, but that's to be expected with pretty much any acrylic paint. Once I finished that first coat, I went through and I started painting the red stripes all over his head. And here's just a little tip for anyone who's painting figures: always work lightest color to darkest color. So if you're painting someone like Shadow the Hedgehog, you're not going to start off with the black immediately. You're going to want to start with the lighter colors like the red, the flesh tone, and the hat, for example, because it's a lot easier to correct those colors over white than it is over black. So that's just a little pro tip there. For the cape, I kind of just used a random mix of color. I kept changing the color throughout. So I kind of used the War Paint Diabolic Plum mixed with some metallic medium, and I just wasn't getting the right color I wanted. Eventually I settled on a mix of like some blue, black violet, and Diabolic Plum. I really couldn't give the exact mixture I have, but I think it came out well in the end. Then I went through and I did Shadow's skin tone. I've always loved and preferred Shadow to have a darker skin tone than other characters, just like how he's been depicted in like Sonic 06 and such. So I used the Vallejo Model Color Dark Flesh color for his skin tone areas. And since it is a lighter color, it did take a few coats. So don't expect everything to be looking perfect with just one coat. Patience is virtue. Now, one of my favorite parts is using this Citadel Reichland Flesh Shade. It's like a wash, and I use that to get the little details in his mouth, to get his mouth kind of cracked open a little bit. I got this really fine tip brush with some Reichland Flesh Shade on there, and I kind of went over the little gap in his mouth, and since it's more watery than acrylic paint, it kind of just filled in the shape of the mouth, and it worked very well for me. Of course, you will also need steady hands, which I just do not have. So it took me holding my breath and a prayer, but there we go. After that, I started just doing some black bits, just because I got a little impatient, so I started filling in the ears there, as well as going around some of the head. I always much prefer painting the color black on any surface compared to any other color. It just goes on so much easier, and it just requires much less coats. Here you can see I'm going in with ultra fine precision to get that little lightning bolt around his eyes, and that was probably the hardest part on this entire custom because making sure that line is super straight and smooth is no easy task, but you know, you guys know who I am. Of course I did it. I recommend using a very fine tip brush and holding your breath. And that's all there is to it. This is me doing it in real time. This ain't no easy task.
Alright, we are here in my secret kitchen. My vampire kitchen. Bleh. Just kidding. Here, I'm going to be dyeing the Sonic body black in order to fit the look of Shadow the Hedgehog. So here I have my body with, you know, without the hands and the shoes and everything. I have this little cotton round that I got, and I'm going to use some acetone. This is ultra powerful acetone, and I'm going to use that to rub off the belly, I guess, design on Sonic himself. It doesn't take much work. You can just take it off in one wipe. Look at that. There you go. And now we have our Sonic body that's ready to be dyed. I have a trash pan that I got at Walmart for like $5, $6, $6, $7, and filled it up with a little bit of water. But what I'm going to do this time is something I didn't do in the last video, is I'm going to add a little bit of acetone to the mix before I boil it. Maybe about like that much. Not too much. The acetone really helps the dye stick to the body itself. So now that that's mixed in there, I'm going to get this water boiling and I'll be right back. Alright, here I am a little bit after setting it to boil, and you can see there's some bubbles starting to form. You don't want it like super scorching, boiling hot, like bubbles all over the place, but I think a moderate amount of bubbles is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my Sonic figure, and we want to make sure the dye reaches all of the disc part, or the disc areas, because if I dye it just like this, whenever I bend the joints, you're still going to see blue underneath, and then when I go like that, you'll still see the tan in the underarms. So I'm going to put him in there in a pose where a lot of the discs are visible, so maybe something like that, where the knees are visible, the shoulders, and the leg pegs, and I'm going to plop him in there. You can see bits of him sticking out, but that's okay because throughout we're going to be reorienting him to make sure all the areas get dyed. And then I also have some other parts for other figures I'm going to be dyeing, so I'm going to just toss those in there as well. I usually, when I'm dyeing something like this, I'll use either like 1/4 of the bottle, or maybe even half of the bottle. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, this is the dye that I use, Rit Dye More Synthetic Graphite. You want to make sure it's synthetic because that is what lets it stick to the plastic. If you get the regular Rit graphite color, it's not going to work. So synthetic is going to be the move. Alright, I think I've given it enough time, and I think it's time to start digging in there and fishing these guys out. I use a plastic fork. Don't use your utensils that you wouldn't want to get dirty. So I'm just using this cheapy plastic fork. Here's a limb, and look at that, it's completely black, which is great. Here's the body. Look at that. Oh, having a hard time. Look at that, look at that. That looks good. My children, freeing my children from the depths of hell. I got some gloves on because I'm going to be handling these things with my hands, and I don't want black dye all over my hands. So here I have the Sonic body, and like I mentioned, there are going to be some areas I didn't get dye in them, so if I extend the leg forwards, you could still see the blue showing through. So I'm going to pose him in a way where those other joints that didn't get dyed are exposed, like the underarms right there. There we go, and then plop him back in there, and then let that dye for a little bit longer. Alright, after leaving them in there for a few more minutes, I think it's time to get them out. There's our body, and look at that. Those blue areas are no longer blue on his butt cheeks. And then once that's done, you're going to want to rinse all the parts off in the sink, but make sure none of the dye droplets get on any dishes or anything, because this dye is synthetic and you do not want it sticking to your dishes. God damn it! And once you rinsed everything off, I got a little cup full of like ice water, and I'm just gonna drop the pieces in there and let them soak for a while, maybe like 20 minutes or so, just so it can get the excess dye out of there. And I'm gonna do this a few times until maybe like 2 or 3 more times.
After dyeing the bodies, I sealed it with about 2 matte coats, and it was time to work on the most tedious part of this entire process, and that is painting the eyes. Now, the eyes are the hardest parts for me because I am a naturally shaky person. I am pretty shaky, so whenever I'm painting, it's just hard to get straight lines and stuff like that. So I just go in very, very slowly. As you can see here, this is all playing in real time, just going around the outline of the eyes with a darker shade, and just to get that dark outline there. Sometimes I mess up a little bit, as you can see. But once I get that dark outline, I go in and I fill it in with a lighter color. Here I'm using Scarlet from Vallejo model color, and you can see it gets that kind of look that Sonic characters' eyes have with that darker outline to them. Once I fill in both eyes, it's time to go in for the pupils, which I just dot some black on my brush, and I start from the top, from the brow, and I brush downwards to get that very, very tiny pupil in there. And now the little gloss in his eyes, and I just dab a little bit of white paint on there, and look at that. That's how I do the eyes for these characters. Next step, the shoes. Now the shoes are some of the coolest parts because they just look very unique. We're so used to seeing Shadow's shoes as like the black, white, and red air shoes that he always has. So I love seeing like an actual different appearance. So what I did for these guys is, like I mentioned earlier, working light color to dark color. So I start off with yellow. I do a base coat of Citadel Phalanx yellow, and I just do about 1 coat of that because right after that I go in with the gold. You could use really any gold you want. I just used Warpaint Fanatics Bright Gold metallic paint. I thought maybe like 2 or 3 coats of that worked good enough. Now for the mixture on the shoes, I used Vallejo model color Black Violet mixed with some model color blue, as well as a little bit of Diabolic Plum, and I got the decent look that I was going for. I honestly can't tell you if that was the exact mixture I did because I took a lot of experimenting, but just know at least it involved blue and black violet. So it took me about 3 coats to get that color laid on completely, and I went and I did all the finer details on the shoes, and I used a very, very fine tip brush to do the outlines on the shoes. The hands were pretty simple. It was literally just purple and then the gold ring, so there wasn't really much explaining to do there. Then off camera, I painted the bow tie and the rallies on the dyed black shadow body, and I put this guy all together.
And that's how I made Vampire Shadow. And I have to say, this guy was a lot of fun to make. I really loved painting all the designs, you know, the streak on his eye, adding a cape that kind of made me think of how Lego characters wear capes, putting it around their head pegs. And I just think the design really comes together. The purples, you know, contrast nicely with the red on his hair and his rallies, and it just looks like a really cool figure, I think. And for anyone who's interested in purchasing kits to make a Vampire Shadow figure of their own, go ahead and join my Discord server down in the description below, where I will have this kit available to purchase whenever I do custom order drops. Now, this was just one of many costumes that are found in the Sonic Forces Speed Battle mobile game, and if there are any other specific costumes you would like to see made into an action figure, please do let me know, because there are a lot of awesome costumes within that game that I would love to tackle. Thank you so much for watching. You stay safe this Halloween, and I will see you guys next time. I can't do an evil, sinister laugh. I don't have enough air in my lungs to do like a nice drawn out laugh. Let me try it again. That was pretty good, right? That was good.